I'm Mojo Jojo? I'm Mojo Jojo. I'm Mojo Jojo. Alright. This is so hard. Give me something a little bit more than just trauma.
Me. Why am I like this?
Please, why did he have to have a tail? Hi friends, welcome to the long-awaited August monthly wrap-up. I thought I was going to get this up last week or even the week before that. Usually my August monthly wrap-ups or my wrap-ups in general comes out in the first week or two of the month, but this is now the second to last week of September, but better late than never, right? I have a big spiel about what's happening, what's going on. I have a little bit of a life update for you all in the next reading vlog, and that will take up a majority of the reading vlog or will be the highlight of the reading vlog, so make sure to stay tuned for that video. But without any further ado, let's get right into the August monthly wrap-up. As always, I have timestamped everything below, so if you're interested in the reading data, you can just skip ahead to that section, or if you're interested in a particular book that I'm talking about, you can also go ahead to those particular section. As always, I will try to keep it spoiler free, and if post-editing Mimi sees any spoilers, she will pop up a little spoiler tag for you guys all to be warned ahead of a time. And yeah, let's get right into the reading statistics. The very first one up is, as always, how many books I read this month. I read 10 books ish. It's an ish because 2 of the books are technically part of a video game, and all of the reading I did this month comes out to being approximately 4,139 pages. All right, next up, I have my monthly breakdown for my reading per day per pages. You guys can see that the first third of the month I read pretty strong. We see the bar filled up all the way to the right. And then by the second third of the month, you can see that I slowly trickled down a little bit. And then by the last third of the month, I wasn't reading as much or as strong as I normally did. Honestly, the last month of August, the last third at least, felt really slow, and I think it had to do with the kind of books I was reading. They were definitely more on the heavier side in terms of the morals and the messages that were being passed through the book, and I really wanted to take the time to digest it. So with more literary intense books, I definitely noticed and realized that I take a little bit more time to read, whereas my normal reading speed is approximately 1.25 pages a minute. With those books, I feel like I definitely slowed down a lot, which is not to say like I didn't like the book. I think the books that I read the last third of the month were pretty good in my opinion. It just required a lot more brain work, and I guess I read slower when my brain is cranking. As for my average star rating, it's 4.28, which seems to be consistent throughout all the months, but we'll know for sure by the end of the year when I do my yearly wrap up. This kind of shows me that I might have to reevaluate my star rating system. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think I need to reevaluate it? Because right now, it seems like, as you guys can see on the screen, this month I rated most of my books 4 stars with a couple of 5 stars, with none being 1, 2, or 3 stars. I do think I give a pretty relaxed scale rating. Like, I have to absolutely hate the book and DNF'd it for it to be 1. 2 stars is like I trudged through the book, I did not enjoy it, I did not have a good time with it, but I read it. Like, there's no context or anything for me to get out of the book. 3 is I finished it. There were moments where I just had a hard time completing it. And then 4 is like overall I liked it. There were moments that were kind of iffy for me, but it didn't really take away from the story. And then 5 is like I had a really good time reading it. I feel like I rate books on my moods mostly, and I like reading books that I enjoy, so I end up rating the books a lot higher. So it kind of skews the rating system a little bit, but it's also a personal thing. I don't know. Let me know if you guys have heard about the discourse about how people think that some people rate too easily and it's kind of ruined reading. I'm not like into that whole drama, but I have heard about it, I have listened to it, and I was like, maybe it is a good point for me to kind of go back and reevaluate what I'm rating stuff. But at the same time, rating is subjective, so I don't think that their stance and their opinions are right, to be quite honest. But I do see that for at least me, maybe I do want to go back and reflect for 2025 how I want to go about rating my books. But Of course, Mimi classic tangent aside, let's move on to the amount of money I saved for the month of August, which is approximately $126. This is by far one of the highest money saved months yet, and I'm hoping to keep up this trend with the last quarter of the year. I'm really hoping to use my library resources a lot more, but of course, I'm also looking to tackle my physical TBR, so maybe 1 or 2 months of the last quarter will be heavier on the books that I've already owned, but I'm definitely not going to be going out and purchasing books anymore, except for 2 pre-orders that are going to come out in 2025, which is a book from Abby Jimenez and a book from Emily Henry. So far, those 2 are the only ones on my radar right now, and I'm gonna keep it that way. Honestly, at this point, it's probably easier if I were to list out the books that I did not borrow from the library, but I also want to flex all the books that I did borrow from the library. And as you guys can see, I have approximately 7 books, I think, that were borrowed from the library, most of them being audiobooks this month. And speaking of audiobooks, let's move on to my reading format breakdown. We have a brand new format this month, and I'm going to keep it that way. It is video games. Currently, I am listing games that have storyline and plot to them, where you are actively reading for a good chunk of the game to be calculated as part of my reading. At the moment, how I'm tracking the number of pages I read is with time. So essentially, I just calculate how much time it has passed for me to finish one section of the stories. So once I complete that section or that area, I stop the timer and then I multiply it by 1.25, which is approximately how much I read per minute. And yeah, that's how I'm calculating the pages read. It is a little bit skewed here and there, of course, like I mentioned previously, more literary books, more books with a lot more content and meat to it. It does take me a little bit longer to read. And my average reading speed has only been from books that were on the lighter side or much more fun. I think that most of the reading speed came from The Wicked King, actually, which is pretty funny. That book I just sped through, so it might be a little biased, a little bit shifted, but video games are pretty easy content to consume, so I think 1.25 pages sounds about right. So my whole spiel about video games aside, the one surprising thing about this month is that I mostly listen to audiobooks, which is kind of a surprise, but kind of not, because in a previous monthly wrap-up or video, I mentioned that I used to listen to a lot of audiobooks. That's actually how I got back into reading, and then I suddenly stopped. I think I kept that in mind, and then for the month of August, I'm really leveraging and using audiobooks feature that I have on Spotify, on Hoopla, and on Libby. So that allowed me to get through a lot more books than I normally would have, I think. And again, this month I'm doing the same. I'm really enjoying audiobooks right now. I feel like I could do it while I'm working, while I'm playing other games, while I'm cleaning. So audiobooks just make multitasking so much fun. Of course, not all books are great audiobooks, because some books you really need to pay attention to all the little details, but the current books that I have been listening to on audiobooks have been beautiful, spectacular, and I love it. Now let's move on to the genre breakdown, and let me give a little bit of drum roll. We have coming in first, not romance, because who am I? It is actually sci-fi. Sci-fi. I would have never guessed it would have been number 1 for all my genre for the month in any of the month for this year, but it's a pleasant surprise, that's for sure. So coming in first place is sci-fi, then we have mystery, and then third place is romance. Romance, what happened? You got bumped down. You went down the scale. And I think this does have to do with the fact that I did read 4 murderbot books this month. Honestly, I had a blast with it, so I was just binging and going through as many books as I could from the murderbot series, as long as I had the time for it. And I think that really padded up the sci-fi amount, because every book, I tag every single book under sci-fi, because technically they are their own individual books. And I think that bumped up the amount just a little bit, you know, just 4 books. And yeah, so that is the genre breakdown. A quite bit of a surprising turn for the genre. And the last slot we have here is what book I am rolling over for the month of September. I am rolling over The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks at 57%. This book is really dense, but I mean, at this point, I have already finished it. Overall, I really enjoyed the information that the book gives about Henrietta Lacks and everything that comes with it. And the only reason I didn't finish it was just simply, it was a lot of information to take take in, and I journaled a lot. I had a lot of thoughts and opinions and trying to figure out where things are on the timeline, because I believe Henrietta Lacks cells were like when polio was still rampant in the US. And I think her cells were what were used to test the polio vaccine. So she basically helped the cure for polio, which, so in general, that book had gave me a lot of thoughts. So it's definitely a much slower read for me than I would normally have, and it's a little bit dark and depressing, but that will come probably more in detail in the September wrap up. And with that, I think all the reading statistical data is completed. Let us move on to the actual books I read for the month of August. All right, the first book we have is The 7-Year Slip, and I gave it 4.5 stars. I love this book so much. It was such a delightful read that I did not expect. The premise of the story is that Clementine, a character, is at a peak of her career in her life where she's at a diverging path. She's kind of unsure of where to go, what to do, and her life is just not what she wants it to be. Lo and behold, one day she steps into her apartment and she gets sent back 7 years in the past. That's crazy. 7 years in the past. There's a man living inside of that apartment, and they kind of grow onto each other. They learn about each other's habit and they fall in love. It's not a spoiler. I mean, it's a romance book. I'm not going to tell you anything aside from that aspect, but they do kind of fall in love with each other, except they have a 7-year gap between them, right? Because she's technically 7 years in the future and he's 7 years in the past. So they can't really connect. A lot of time travel shenanigans would happen. So this book also talked a lot about kind of like that diverging path that she's on. And honestly, her unsureness of where she is in life and what she's doing with it, like that's me, for real, for real, for real. Like that's me right now. And this book kind of gave me a little bit of a reality check on my own personal life. And we're going to talk about that in a reading vlog, but let's just say I followed her path. Those of you who have read it, who have seen it, I did what she did, and now I don't know what I'm going to be doing with my life, but it's a new beginning for me, at least. And I'm hoping it'll be like Clementine's. And honestly, this was just a really fun read. The romance had a lot of yearning, had a lot of angst and also jealousy, but not in like a way that makes you annoyed. I think there's something sweet about it because there's just this whimsical aspect of it. And it's this idea that both of them are 7 years apart, once in the future and once in the past. And it's just how they could connect with each other in that moment, right? So it's a beautiful love story, honestly. I really, really enjoyed it, and I love the time travel aspect. I didn't think it would work. I'm the biggest time travel hater. Every single time travel thing I have ever read or seen, it's done so poorly. It makes zero sense because one small thing you do could ultimately cause like a ripple effect, and I'm a firm believer in that. But I felt like the story made the magical realism done so well that I couldn't really see any real big gaping plot holes that were created because of the time travel. So I really enjoyed that aspect. I thought it was a very well done book, especially in the terms of time travel. Next up, I read the Murderbot Diaries 1 through 4. So all 4 of them were listened on audiobook, and I gave an average of 4.2 stars. The Murderbot Diaries follows a robot, an AI sentient robot that hacked his governor module, basically his control chip, where he doesn't have to listen to commands of other people or whatever is trying to give them commands, right? And honestly, I really vibe with this book. This is a very brief sci-fi. You don't really get too much about the character and the world in the first book, but as you progress and as you continue reading the different books, you will get a little bit more glimpse into the world. The best way I can describe this dystopian sci-fi world is, imagine if we were like centuries into the future. This is when we can actually travel between different planets. We're living in different planets and we're actually exploring space in general. That's the vibe that I am getting with the Murderbot Diaries. And then we have these sentient robot helping us with day-to-day activities. Some people use them as protection, some people use them as guards, and then we have Murderbots whose whole ideal mission is to shoot and blow up things, right? Honestly, the Murderbot is the quintessential me. He's lazy, he's laid back, he doesn't want to socialize too much, and he's socially awkward. I absolutely love and adore him. Like, his best things that he wants to do is just to lay back and watch TV show like me. Me too, man. Me too. So I think this Murderbot just makes me so happy. It was a very fun read, and if you're just looking to dabble into sci-fi, which I was, this was a really easy book to pick up and stop and pick up at any time. There's not, I wouldn't say there's too much depth to the book, but it's just meant to be something fun. And if you're just trying to get out of a reading slump, this is a great book. The character interaction is where it's at in this book. And book number 2, hands down, is probably going to be my favorite of the series. Speaking of the series, I think there's about 3 or 4 more books in the series, and technically right now I have no other books on audiobooks. I think I'm going to pick this back up for the month of September, try to get through a couple more books for the series, and you guys will know my final thoughts and updates either in September or October. Next up, we have the video game that I played for the month of August, and it's technically my jail pick for my husband, and it is Honkai Star Rail. Alright, I'm sure those who don't play a lot of video games are wondering why a video game is on my reading wrap-up, and the answer to that is this particular video game that I am playing is very story-driven and plot-driven. And because of this, I feel like I'm actually actively reading and remembering the plots and all the different characters. I decided to also include it as part of my reading wrap-up. Alright, now this is going to be like my 4th or 5th take of trying to explain Honkai Star Rail without me even fully grasping and understanding Honkai Star Rail as its own, both because the storyline's pretty dense and because I find that we don't know much about the world yet, because we are playing as a character in this world and we are still trying to learn and find out things about this world as we go. A really big point is that I'm basically on book 2 of an uncompleted series, so there are still mysteries out there that I don't know about because it hasn't been published. All that spieling aside, let's give my 4th or 5th attempt on the plot, which is basically we're a bunch of adventurers traveling through space. So this is a sci-fi dystopian world in the future where traveling through space is doable, and then there are actually inhabitants in each individual space that we go and visit. And we're just doing adventures just to see what things are happening, just meet new people, see the different spaces. So we're kind of traveling for fun. However, a big premise of the story, and we don't know much about, is that there are these Stellaron that just appear out of nowhere, and you can think of it, and it is described in the game as the cancer of worlds. And in the first world that we encounter, a example of what happens is that the Stellaron cause the whole world, or that whole planet, to go into an ice age, effectively ruining the ecosystem of that world. And we as adventurers are doing things to kind of defeat the Stellaron, remove the Stellaron. I say defeat because it's like it's a video game and you're running around, you're fighting bosses, but you're effectively trying to remove the cancer of all worlds and then bringing that world back up from the ground. And so, like, that's the best I can give an explanation. I know Lauren and Chris play this game, so maybe if you guys have a better explanation, you guys can write something down below and I'll pin it. But that's the general premise. And then World 2 is kind of similar, but then we meet our arch nemesis, but not really arch nemesis. And that's a whole other thing as well. Anyways, I think that is the best I could do with the summary of the story. And I give the story currently, from the tutorial to World 1 and World 2, a 4 stars. I don't think the story is revolutionary. I think the story is kind of predictable at moments, but the character interaction and the uniqueness of the characters is kind of like what makes the game great. I think the big thing that makes this game works and the storyline to be fun is the conversation and the communication between you as the main character and with all the other fellow supporting characters. So I think that's why I gave it a 4 stars. Overall, I still enjoyed it. I think in particular, Honkai Star Rail does a really good job with hyping up the climax. You get a really immersive feel when you play this game. So you're not only reading the story, you get also the background music, you also hear the characters talking if you want, and then you see the actual visuals on the screen. So it's a very like dynamic way and feel of reading the storyline and immersing yourself in this world. So it's kind of like in between an audiobook and in between a reading, but also kind of like a little bit of video games on the side. So I have been playing it a little bit more than I thought I would have, and I'm enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would have. All right, my next book for the month of August is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I am sure you guys have seen a lot of talks about this book already, so I'm not going to go too in depth about the summary, but essentially we have Emma and Justin who are cursed, where the person that they date will ultimately break up with them, but the next person they date will be their soulmate. But that essentially means that they can't find their own soulmates, right? So I thought that was a pretty interesting and fun premise, and I gave this book 5 stars. Not because of the premise itself, but because of the characters and the character growth, and the depths of all the characters in this book is awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed it. As you guys can see, I have marked up a bunch of tabs and a bunch of highlights in this book. I just feel like Justin is the sweetest person ever with his own flaws. And then Emma just has this strong personality of hers, and yet she also recognizes her weaknesses, and both of them grow and learn from each other in a positive manner and support each other, which I really enjoyed about in this book. I have like nothing bad to say about this. I think that even though her books, the Just for the Summer, can be read as a standalone, I highly encourage you to read the first book, which is Part of Your World, and the second book, Yours Truly, before you read this, because I feel like you're just missing out on another layer of convolutedness and story to it if you don't read the first 2 books. And I think the first 2 books were awesome. I gave Part of Your World 4.5 stars, and I gave Yours Truly 5 stars. So I think Abby Jimenez is an amazing writer. Highly recommend, can't recommend it enough. I'm sure you've heard a lot of people rate and rave about this book. I think it's highly justified, and it's not overhyped at all. You know how I said, funny story, the ending wasn't it for me? The ending was kind of what caused my rating to go down. This ending right here was it. This was the right ending. Like, I think that even if they gave us the stereotypical ending that we would have had, it would have been fine. I think I still would have rated it at least a 4 star. But just because Abby Jimenez wrote that ending and how she wrapped up kind of what Justin goes through and what Emma goes through, it was so beautifully done. I had to give it 5 stars. I thought it was a very well done and a very good way to wrap up the issues that they faced in the book, because otherwise I would have felt like it was brushed under the rug and it's a forced happily ever after moment, which is good when you're reading a book, but when you think about it a little bit more, it's not up there, right? So Abby Jimenez, you truly cannot miss. I can't wait for your next book. All right, the last book, but definitely not the least, is Pachinko, and this was my pick for the LMAid book club pick for the month of August, and I gave it 3.75 stars. Now, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed the book for its literary aspect, but it was a very depressing read. This book basically follows a multi-generational family, a Korean family, through basically the Japanese colonialism and World War II, and it's rough. It's kind of like trauma after trauma after trauma. I love it because there's a very good representation of historically what could have happened to families during this time. But I thought it was a very intense read, and quite honestly, I really enjoyed it for the first half of the book, particularly because I really liked Sunja as a character. She is basically the person whose point of view we see from the most. The book is written in a third-person perspective, so you really get to see what's happening and then everyone's reaction, and kind of like what holds the whole family together and everyone's thoughts and opinions is generally stemming from Sunja as a whole. So I thought her character was great. I loved her character. I loved seeing her grow and all the struggles and everything they faced. But this book was rough. We see tragedy after tragedy happen to this family, and I really liked it because it gives a different perspective of Korea. I find that in today's media, we see a lot about like the current modern world of Korea, which is vastly different than the historical Korea, but not a lot talks about during the period of colonialism from Japan, and then also the racism that they faced, along with kind of the struggles they have with adapting and living under the Japanese colonialism. So I thought it was a very good read in that aspect. There were still themes of trying to fit in and assimilating to the Japanese culture, and I felt like this is a good representation of people in power and what they always view people who are different from them. Whenever you have power, anyone who's different from you is viewed and casted on as terrible light. And it just goes to show that no matter where you are, whether you're in the West or in the East, it's the same across all boards. I really enjoyed reading and seeing the portrayal of that message. But the last third of the book, when we start focusing on the grandkids, I just felt like there was a little bit of a disconnect. Those characters weren't really intriguing me, and they do face their own struggles because of their backgrounds as Koreans, and also face like discrimination because of their identity as well. But I just didn't think it was done as well as it did with like Sunja's life as a whole. But I just don't know. The whole ending was just very depressing. The whole book as a whole does not give like a moral or a meaning behind it, something to look forward to. And I guess that's where it really fell off for me, and it just didn't give me a good time to read. And that's why I gave it 3.75 stars. So you know how I said the last book was technically the last book? No, actually, I completely forgot a whole book in my August monthly wrap up. This is the first time it has happened. So here's post-editing Mimi all in her glory, here for you guys to talk about the book that I completely forgot about, and I do not know why, because this was one of my 5-star reads for the month of August, and it is The Queen of Nothing. This is the last book in the Elfheim trilogy. I don't have the name on top of my head. I literally somehow wrote a whole script. You see here, a whole script for this video, and then I just completely did not write anything about Queen of Nothing. So we are winging it because I don't have the mental capacity to write up a script right now. So don't mind me if I just end up on a tangent. So the Queen of Nothing basically follows Jude after her exile, and it is so much fun. The trickery, the thievery, and everything that happened in the third book was great. I don't know how to talk about the third book without spoiling anything in the second book and the first book, but a really big thing about fairies is that they cannot lie and they have these prophecies. So it's a lot of riddles and mind games, and I really like how the authors did her interpretation of everything in the story itself. Jude and Carden really grew on to me as characters. Honestly, I really love the two of them together. I love him just like making Jude his priority. She is his queen, and he's not like necessarily a king of himself. He doesn't really care for that title, but he does want to protect Jude and everything about it, even though like the ending of the second book was just like what happened, and how she ended up back in Elfheim after the second book was just beautiful. I love how that all played out. Anyways, in general, it was a great read. I am so glad that Chris wanted to buddy read with me. I'm so glad that Lauren actually told me to be like, hey, I promise you it will get better, because she was right. It did get better. This is a very unexpected book that I ended up loving. I would say that the first book doesn't really have any of the romance aspect. The second book is true enemies to lovers, and the last book is just them being a couple, but not really, because I think that the romance of this is really in the back burner, and then the storyline and the plot and her as a character inside this world of fairy is the primary plot. So thoroughly enjoyed it. I would definitely recommend anybody who wants to read the book to read the physical book. I have my grievances with the audiobooks. You guys already know this. In general, I don't know how I would have enjoyed it if I actually read it as a physical book, but I do think the first 2/3 of the book is very slow and the last third really takes off, so you just gotta grit your teeth and go through the whole series. The only thing left for me to say is that I really wish that they did. I really wish Carden did have a tail. Please, why did he have to have a tail? Because that kills it for me. Like, he could have been a hot fairy, but then we hear sometimes he has this tail whipping around, and I'm just like, ooh, that just took a nosedive. You know, like me being interested in him was here, and it just took a nosedive every time that tail comes out. And with that, I think I am officially wrapping up this video. All right, that about concludes all the books I read for the month of August. Did you guys read any of these books? If you guys do, definitely let me know down in the comments section what you guys thought about the book and what you gave it. And thank you so much for watching this whole video. I know that I was late on this video. This video came up a lot later than I expected it to. And then after this video, I'm going to have to get cracking at editing if I want this up by tomorrow, which is the 23rd. I'm filming it on Saturday, and generally I like to post my videos on Sunday. So yes, I have been slacking just a little bit because I've been pretty busy and I have a lot of things on my plate and on my mind right now, but we are probably going back to our regularly scheduled programming starting next week, and I'm super excited about that. And without any further ado, thank you so much for watching this video, and if you guys like bookish content with a lot of statistical data, definitely make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys hopefully next week for another video. Bye!